to another edition of Masters and Mentors. I am your host, Lee Forrester, and today I have the absolute honor of speaking with Ms. LaShell Wooten. She is someone who is near and dear to my heart. She is a helper, she is a healer, and she is a human too, and a pretty awesome one at that. But one of the reasons that we wanted to talk to LaShell today is because she has made a career out of helping people. And so for all of you who may be considering going into social work or becoming a coach, and you want to know about the pathway and what it takes to do that, we got you covered today. That's what we're going to be discussing. So hello, LaShell.
Hey, Amber. Thanks for having me. I have been a licensed social worker for 25 years now. And so when I started in my career as a helper through social work, I really had a lot of traditional social work jobs. I worked in foster care, I worked in after school, I worked with new moms, variety of groups, which I loved. But what I realized through my work, through the job in the career that I had, was my favorite part of that work was really the conversation and the coaching, right? The social work career involves coaching and therapy, but it also involves things like casework, right? You have to go with people to appointments. You have to do a lot of paperwork. You have to write a lot of notes. And through doing that for a number of years, I realized the thing I was best at, which lucky for me was the thing that I loved, was coaching. And so from that career, I started taking steps, actually kind of naturally evolved into coaching. So I was coaching long before we talked about life coaches, right? There wasn't, that term wasn't available, and we weren't using it, but right now it's quite common, which is great. But I like coaching more than I liked the social work aspect of a job. And so when I figured that out, I was like, well, how do I get to do this without actually having a job, right? Rolling myself into an entrepreneurial experience that allowed me to stay in the field, use my education, use all of my skills that I gained through the different jobs that I had, but allow me to work the way that I like to work. And so what I figured out in doing that is the thing I love the most about my career is that the work that I do doesn't feel like work. Every day feels quite enjoyable to me because I'm just doing what I like doing. I'm not busying myself with other pieces of this industry that are not really innate to who I am and how I like to spend my time.
Will you talk a bit about why you started along this pathway into the work that you do?
I rolled into college. I had no declared major, right? I started out just doing all the basics. And then I happened upon a sociology class as an elective, and I loved it. That was the first time that I actually realized that I liked helping. I knew I was a helper. I knew my friends would come to me for advice and things like that, even when I was in high school. I didn't realize there was an actual career attached to being helpful to people. So while I was in college, I started learning that it's great to be a helper, but you also have to eat, right? I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be in college forever. I'm going to move into adulthood and have to pay for my own life. And so that's when I started looking into the helping professions as a career.
So now you are a coach and a speaker, and and a transformative human behavior specialist. So what I would like to ask you now is for you to tell us about a day in the life of a social worker versus a day in the life of you currently, where you stand in the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. So a day in the life of a social worker, most social workers have a job with an organization or an agency or an institution like a hospital or a school, right? So you got to go to work, you got to show up where that job is, and you usually have a set of activities you have to complete. You have to meet with people, you have to make calls to people. You have to find resources for people. You have to write case notes about what you're doing to help people. There's usually meetings involved, right? If you work at a school or you work at a hospital, you have to meet with the administration. You have to talk about the people you're serving with other people who are also serving them, collaborate on their continuity of care and then squeeze lunch into that somewhere. With social work, typically, and this was one of the things I realized didn't work for me, is you are in an office and everyone you're helping comes in and sees you. And then they leave and then someone else comes in and sees you. And then they leave and someone else. And I felt like I was in a box. And I was like, when do I get to go out there? Because I like to be out in the world. I like to meet in different places. I want to meet you in a park. I want to meet you at the library, right? I don't just always want to be in this one space. So that is a typical day of a social worker. And then you return the next day and you do it again. A day in my life is I get up in the morning. I usually go for a walk. I do some yoga. I make myself some breakfast. Then I look at my calendar for the day, which usually involves a variety of things, which is something that was important to me. I usually have a couple of clients who I'm coaching, which most of the time I'm coaching on Zoom, comfort of my home. I usually have a meeting or two in projects that I'm involved in that are helping to build out social emotional services anywhere in the world. And then sometimes I get to have these creative moments where like I take breaks in my day and I do a little bit of like woodworking or crocheting, right? Because I have space for that. And then usually in my evening, when I'm starting to settle down is when ideas that have come to me throughout the day, which I usually jot down, I usually spend a little time thinking about if I want to turn any of those ideas into something that I can either offer to people who need help or collaborate with someone else or some other organization that's already doing something that my idea would fit into. Sometimes I travel. I'll go on retreats and speak at retreats. I'll speak at colleges. I'll speak at people's community organizations. Recently, I spoke at a brunch. So it provides me with this variety of life where I get to move about, be in different environments, serving different people, meeting different people.
I just want to also point out that, you paid your dues. A lot of times we think that we can get into an industry or into a space and that overnight we're going to be big and we're going to be able to make all of this money. And it doesn't always happen like that. You built up your client base. You built up your skill base on someone else's dime, being paid for what you were doing. And then you were able to transfer into an entrepreneur in this space. And I think it's just important for us to point that out to people who may be thinking, well, I just want to jump right into being a coach.
I spent a lot of years, over 15 years. And I will say one of the benefits of working in a field, especially when you're first getting started, you do get the skills, you do put in time, but it's the connections, right? When I was working in the field as a social worker proper, I met so many people through the jobs I had, right? Through the collaborations of the organization, the clients I served, that when I did decide to transition into full-time entrepreneurship, I had this huge book of people I can contact and connect with to help me, to point me in the right direction, to connect me to things. I wouldn't have had that if I really tried right after graduate school to develop a business, because I work for myself now and I'm here and it's just me. I really have to make effort to make connections. So working in the industry of social work for the number of years I did, it really set me up to have a much easier pathway to building out my entrepreneurial journey.
Could you give some advice to someone who may be starting out in this career?
Absolutely. So in the helping profession, first of all, the profession has grown significantly, right? Especially since the pandemic. right? Social work used to be somewhere in the 50s on top careers, and it bumped up to the top 5 during the pandemic, right? Just because the need was raised. So if you are thinking about this industry, it's a really great industry to be in. It's very nimble and flexible. But what I suggest is you start with college. You definitely need to go to college. Because you're in a helping industry, you will need certifications and licenses, one or both, in order to be able to help and do so safely, right? No matter what state you live in, they're going to require you to have certain certifications for most jobs and certain licenses for other jobs. So you have to go to college, number one, because our culture is always changing. Our society is always changing. Technology changes social emotional wellness. So you have to stay on top of that.
LaShell, I can imagine that anybody watching is going to want to know about your courses and your programs and what you offer. So where can folks find you?
You can find me at LaShellWooten.com, which is my website, and all social media. I'm LaShell Wooten. And my podcast is Abandoned Ordinary, but it's also with my name. So anything with my name, you will find me.
Love it. Wooten, LaShell Wooten. LaShell, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I know you will inspire many
My
with
pleasure.